Chaos across parts of Mexico tonight. The Mexican government killed the most wanted cartel boss alongside 8 other cartel members in a military operation. The killing sparked widespread unrest with suspected gang members torching buses and businesses while clashing with security forces. Many Americans are now stranded there, including a Beaverton woman. Flights in and out of the country are in flux.
In fact, in the last 2 hours, the U.S. State Department advised more areas of Mexico have returned to normal following widespread unrest. Cautioned U.S. citizens in Puerto Vallarta, Guadalajara to continue to shelter in place. Meanwhile, a crisis hotline says it has fielded hundreds of calls since violence erupted yesterday. Good afternoon. Thanks so much for joining us. I'm K2's Deborah Knapp.
And I'm Reich Aswell. We have extensive coverage for you tonight of the situation unfolding in Mexico, how Oregonians stuck there are doing, and what could happen next. National correspondent Atra Onashar gets us up to speed.
Pandemonium in Puerto Vallarta.
It really did look and feel like a war zone. And I think that feeling of anxiety, that feeling of what does happen next or what could happen next is driving what a lot of people are feeling right now.
American tourists stranded in the popular Western Mexico vacation destination, the U.S. State Department urging them to shelter in place.
If you love your life, stay here. Don't go anywhere.
Fallout from a Mexican military operation that killed one of the world's most wanted cartel leaders, Nemesio Oseguera Cervantes, known as El Mencho, head of the Jalisco New Generation Cartel. U.S. Deputy Secretary of State Christopher Landau says, "This is a great development for Mexico, the U.S., Latin America, and the world. The good guys are stronger than the bad guys." And P.S. I'm watching the scenes of violence from Mexico with great sadness and concern. It's not surprising that the bad guys are responding with terror, but we must never lose our nerve. Animo, Mexico. American tourist Roseanne Hope says there was an explosion near where she's staying.
We ran up to the grocery store and there were like 50 people in there just taking all the food off the shelves like you'd see in COVID.
Mass flight disruption Sunday continuing into Monday.
We hope that during the course of today, or at the latest tomorrow, all the flights will be restored.
Most of the hundreds of roadblocks put in place by cartel members had been removed, Mexican authorities said Monday. The State Department running crisis hotlines for Americans impacted by the unrest who need assistance. One for those calling from the U.S. and another for those abroad, including Mexico. The White House voicing support for the operation that killed El Mencho, calling him a top trafficker of fentanyl into the U.S., and confirming the U.S. provided intelligence support to Mexico. President Trump issuing a statement saying Mexico must step up their efforts on cartels and drugs. In Washington, I'm Atra Alnashar.
The violence in Mexico is hitting close to home for some.
K2's Thanvi Verma is live in Hillsborough for us tonight. So, Thanvi, you just spoke with a woman who has family in Puerto Vallarta.
I did, Deb, and I also spoke to a Beaverton woman who says she's on day 2 of sheltering in place. Take a listen.
Shu-ling Garver lives in Beaverton but spends several months out of the year in Puerto Vallarta. She says her stay this time around is like no other. On Sunday morning, she says she woke up to plumes of smoke, which you can see in this video she took. She says she learned from locals that it was cartel violence. Her community sheltering in place.
And so many people have no food. It really is. There's like a medicine shortage. Some people, that they need a medicine and all that. So pretty scary.
And that's not all.
A friend of mine, she was driving down the beach. She didn't know what's happening either. And then saw somebody die down the road. And then she saw the gunman pointing a gun at her. She says she was so scared. She just backed away. Fortunately, she was able to leave. And she's alive to tell the story after that.
And Garver will not be changing her travel plans. She's not planning to come back anytime soon. She's slated to come back in April. Coming up at 5 p.m., we hear from a family who's saying they're having a hard time getting in touch with a loved one. Reporting live in Hillsborough, Thanvi Verma, K2 News.
Thanvi, thank you for that. Now we're looking beyond what's happening in Mexico and why it's happening. Lewis and Clark Professor of History, Dr. Elliot Young, joins us live now. Elliot, thanks for your time this afternoon.
Sure, happy to be here.
This particular cartel leader has been in power for a while. What led to this weekend's raid?
Well, this is a strategy that the Mexican government has pursued since about 2006, which is to go after cartel leaders, capture them. But I think right now with Trump and other Republicans threatening to invade Mexico militarily to go after cartels, I think adds pressure to Claudia Sheinbaum, Mexico's president, to try to capture some of the drug cartel leaders.
The leader of that cartel is dead, but the U.S. Embassy is fearing more violence. What do you think about Mexico's response to the cartels and this latest mission in whether there could be a turf war on the horizon?
So everything we've seen since 2006 to the present suggests when you get rid of one drug leader, what results is more violence as people within that cartel and rival cartels fight over turf, over territory. So unfortunately, although one could say the capture of and killing of Mencho is a positive development, I don't think it bodes well for Mexico. I think we've seen the violence that has occurred already in the wake of his killing, and I think we could expect more violence. We've had in the past, since 2006, every year 25,000 to 30,000 Mexicans be killed, largely as a result of the drug war, and over 100,000 people disappeared. So unfortunately, I don't think this is the end, but we're likely to see increased violence.
Places like Puerto Vallarta depend on tourism. The U.S. Embassy is telling people to avoid the area for now. What kind of impact do you think that could have?
Sure. I think, Puerto Vallarta, also Tulum, Cancun, lots of other tourist areas were affected by this cartel violence. It's about 15% of the Mexican economy is based in tourism. And so the Mexican government and the U.S. government have an interest in promoting tourism and keeping the country safe for tourists. But of course, my largest concern is not for the disruption of tourists' plans and their cancellation of flights or delays of flights, but for the Mexican people who are really the targets of cartel violence and suffer the brunt of the violence.
Dr. Elliot Young, thank you so much for your time this afternoon.
Sure.
K2's on your side. Continue to track the situation unfolding in Mexico and the status of Americans stranded there. We'll bring you updates as we get them on air and online at K2.com. And now to our other top story. The president of Mexico says there is greater calm in the country today, one day after Mexico's military killed a powerful drug cartel leader known as El Mencho. It led to violence in the streets in parts of western Mexico. The White House confirms U.S. intelligence supported the operation, but says there were no U.S. troops on the ground.
Well, tonight Americans are still being told to shelter in place in Guadalajara and Puerto Vallarta, among other places. All airports in Mexico are open, but there are still some disruptions in those cities. The U.S. Embassy says the situation has returned to normal in other tourist hotspots like Cabo, Cancun, and Cozumel. Within the last 3 hours, we learned Alaska Airlines canceled a flight from Puerto Vallarta to PDX. It was scheduled to arrive about 8 o'clock.
There are 2 other arriving flights and 1 outgoing flight to Mexico still scheduled. Take a look here. Alaska has a flight from Cabo set to arrive at 8:10 p.m. There's a Volaris flight coming in from Guadalajara at 8:55 and an outgoing Volaris flight for Guadalajara scheduled for 11:18 tonight. Alaska says in total they canceled all 16 of their flights from the West Coast to Puerto Vallarta today. They also canceled 4 flights to other cities.
And we're on your side to give you some perspective on the geography there. The violence is centered around the state of Jalisco in the west. El Mencho was killed in a town near Guadalajara. As we mentioned, tourists in Puerto Vallarta, Guadalajara, and surrounding areas are still told to shelter. So cities like Cabo and Cancun are not in this area and no longer under alert.
Mexican military officials say 25 of its National Guard members were killed in the operation. El Mencho led the Jalisco New Generation Cartel. He was notorious for trafficking fentanyl, meth, and cocaine to the U.S. and killing government officials who challenged him. Cartel members responded to his death by blocking roads and setting cars on fire. Schools are closed and citizens are being told to stay inside. Mexico's president is urging calm, saying the roadblocks have now been cleared and security forces are deployed.
And the most important thing right now is to guarantee peace and security for the entire population of all of Mexico. And that is what is being done.
Mexican officials say the operation was also an effort to get the Trump administration to ease pressure on cartels. Mexican citizens say they're worried about the cartel retaliating.
Well, Puerto Vallarta continues to be one of Mexico's top tourist destinations for U.S. visitors. More than 3/4 of the city's international visitors come from the U.S., totaling more than 2 million Americans every year. Travelers from California and the Pacific Northwest make up the largest share of those visitors, fueling the region's booming tourism economy. And tonight we're hearing from a Beaverton woman who's in Puerto Vallarta, sheltering in place.
We're also speaking with people here who have family living in that area. Katu's Thunvi Verma's live for us in Hillsborough. Thunvi, have they been able to get in contact with their family?
So, right, yes and no. It's a bit of a mixed bag. The Hillsborough woman I spoke with said she's able to get a hold of her brother sometimes, but service isn't all that predictable. Whereas I spoke with a Beaverton woman who was able to get service to video call with me.
Shu-ling Garver calls Beaverton home, but she also spends several months each year in Puerto Vallarta. She says this visit has been unlike any other. Sunday morning, Garver woke up to thick plumes of smoke. Her community now sheltering in place.
And so many people have no food. It really is. There's like a medicine shortage. Some people, that they need a medicine and all that. So pretty scary.
That's not all.
A friend of mine, she was driving down the beach. She didn't know what's happening either. And then saw somebody die down the road. And then she saw the gunman pointing a gun at her. She says she was so scared. She just backed away. Fortunately, she was able to leave. And she's alive to tell the story after that.
The impact reaching far past Puerto Vallarta.
I have a brother down there in Mexico, Uruapan, Mexico.
Nancy Chavez, who lives in Hillsborough, has family members caught in the crossfire.
My brother, we spoke to him this morning, and he tells us that it is literally a war down there. There's shooting, everyone has a gun, and fires everywhere. So it's just, either you can just go out and buy food or the essentials. There's no going out for family day or anything, not even to work.
Chavez is no stranger to these circumstances. She says it's actually pretty common.
My mom came from Mexico many years ago, from Michoacan, Mexico, fleeing this kind of violence. She tried to make her life better and better her life. So it's kind of sad that people that live here cannot go back to their land. It's very sad.
And Garver says she's not changing her travel plans. She's slated to come back in April as planned. Reporting live in Hillsborough, Thunvi Verma, K2 News.